Hey there, name's Lucan. I'm 30 summers old, living a quiet life in a small hamlet tucked at the edge of the Eastwood. I suppose you could say things have always been plain for me. I work as a carpenter. I've got a simple little timber cottage with 2 rooms and a stone hearth. It's not much, but it's mine. The kind of village I live in, folks still greet-eyes each other in the morning, trade eggs for bread, lend each other tools, and show up when your roof caves in from snow. It's that kind of place, steady familiar. And I've always been the type to lend a hand. Whether it's helping someone patch their barn door, hauling buckets from the well, or fixing a broken stool for an old widow, I do what I can. Nothing fancy, just honest living. Across the dirt lane from me lives the Harper family, Sir Geoffrey and Lady Sienna. I've known of them for years. They always seemed like the perfect couple. Large stone house garden trimmed neat as a lord's beard. We weren't close or anything, but we'd nod at one another during village festivals, offer well wishes at the solstice, maybe. Share a few words at the market now and then. That day started like any other. I got home just past dusk, went to grab my tools to fix a loose hinge on the cupboard door, and realized I was missing my good chisel. I could have left it for another day, sure, but I hate leaving a thing half done. So I figured I'd head across the lane and ask Sir Geoffrey if he had one I could borrow. As I walked up their stone path, something felt off. The torch by the door was lit, but the shutters were all closed tight. I knocked on the door and waited. No answer. Just as I turned to head back, the door creaked open. And there stood Lady Sienna. I stopped where I was. Her eyes were swollen and red. Tears had smudged dark around her cheeks. Her hair was loose and tangled, and she wore an old wool cloak thrown on like she didn't care what she looked like. She looked like she'd been through a storm. Lady Sienna. "Are you all right?" I asked, caught completely off guard. She tried to straighten up, gave me the faintest smile, but it vanished just as quick. Lucan. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hesitated. My mind scrambled. Should I still ask about the chisel that felt wrong now? Sorry, I mumbled. I was just hoping to borrow a chisel, but it can wait. Are you all right? Her eyes filled again. No, she said quietly. I'm really not. Something in me knew I couldn't walk away. She looked like she needed someone. Anyone. And I just happened to be standing there. If you want to talk, I offered awkwardly. I can stay. Or I can go if you'd rather be alone. She shook her head, slowly wiped her cheek, and stepped aside. You can come in if you want. I nodded and stepped through the doorway. Their home, usually spotless, and still felt different. Heavy, like something unseen had settled into the walls. The hearth was low. A cloth lay tossed on the table. A goblet of wine sat half full beside an open bottle. She motioned for me to sit. I took a seat, careful not to disturb anything. She sat across from me, hands clenched tight in her lap. I cast Geoffrey out, she said, suddenly breaking the silence like breaking glass. I didn't know what to say. My heart sank. I never would have guessed they were having problems, let alone something this serious. I've known for years, she went on, her voice bitter. About the affairs, the lying. I ignored it, told myself it would pass. Thought I could fix things, but today I just couldn't do it anymore. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. I'm really sorry, Lady Sienna. I had no idea. She gave a bitter laugh and wiped her face again. No one did. I played the part well, the dutiful wife, the neat home, the perfect marriage. All a lie. I just didn't want to be alone. Didn't want to feel like I'd failed. Her words hit like stones. I didn't know what to say. But sometimes silence says more than any words. After a moment, I said softly, You're not a failure. You stood up for yourself. That takes strength. She looked at me for a long while, like she was trying to decide if she could believe that. You're a good man, Lucan, she said at last. I've carried this for so long. Now that it's out, I just feel numb. Without thinking, I reached out and placed my hand gently on hers. You don't have to go through this alone, I said. I'm here. She held onto my hand tight. It was the first real sign of life I'd seen in her since I walked through that door. And we sat there like that, talking for what felt like hours. We spoke of pain, of betrayal, of what it meant to trust someone and be broken for it. She told me how Sir Geoffrey had been unfaithful almost from the beginning, how she'd caught him twice, confronted him both times, but stayed hoping things might change. I gave him everything she said, voice barely more than breath. And he gave me nothing but falsehoods. You deserve better, I said, my tone steady. Certain, you deserve someone who sees you, who treats you right. Her eyes shifted slightly, her shoulders lowering just a touch. You really believe that? I do, I said. Every word. The hour grew late. The wine bottle was near empty, only a splash left in the goblet. I rose slowly, stretching the stiffness from my legs. I should take my leave, I said. It's late. She stood as well, walking with me toward the front door. Then she stopped, as if something caught in her thoughts. She didn't speak right away. Her hand brushed the door frame, her eyes unfocused, like she was debating something with herself. Then she looked at me straight and steady and said very softly, "You can stay if you want to." It caught me off guard. Her voice wasn't flirtatious, wasn't even warm, just hollow-tired. She didn't want to be alone. Not tonight. Not after everything. I nodded once. All right, I'll stay. She led me back to the sitting room. I sat beside her on the long bench near the hearth. She leaned gently against my shoulder, slow and careful, like she wasn't sure if it was allowed. Minutes passed, then more. Her breathing slowed. At some point, her weight grew heavier on me, her breath warm and even. She'd fallen asleep. I sat there in the dark, awake eyes fixed on the faint glow from the embers. The silence wrapped around us like a thick wool cloak. And I knew even then something had shifted between us. The morning light crept in through the small window, touching the stone walls in gold. I blinked stiff from sitting all night. Lady Sienna was still there, resting against me, her hair falling loose across my shoulder, peaceful. Still. I moved gently, careful not to wake her. Just sat there in the quiet, listening to the soft crackle of the cooling fire, letting the stillness settle around us. After a time, she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, she looked lost. Then she remembered where she was. She pulled back, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Don't be," I answered. "You needed someone." She gave a faint smile, tired but real, and stood. "I should make some tea." I followed her into the kitchen. It was strangely orderly, considering what had come apart the night before. She moved without words, fetching herbs, pouring water into the iron kettle, setting it on the hook over the hearth. I didn't speak, just stood nearby, giving her the space she clearly needed. When the tea was ready, we sat down at the small wooden table near the window. The only sounds were the kettle settling back into silence and the faint wind outside. "I can't believe you stayed," she said at last, cupping the mug in both hands like it was the only warmth in the room. "I couldn't leave," I replied. "You shouldn't have gone through that night alone." She stared into the tea, not drinking. "Geoffrey would have left," she said. "Actually, he did. Every time life got hard, he vanished." I leaned back slightly. I didn't know how to answer that right away. "You deserve someone who stays," I said after a moment. "Someone who doesn't turn away when things get heavy." She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath too long. "I don't even know what I deserve anymore. I thought I had it all sorted out, the house, the marriage, the life. Now it all feels like rubble." I nodded. "Sometimes it has to fall apart," I said. "So, something better can be built." She gave a faint, wistful smile. "You sound like a healer from the Abbey." I let out a soft laugh. Guess I've had enough heartache to fake the wisdom. That caught her off guard. She looked at me like she hadn't expected that kind of honesty. You always seem steady." I shrugged. "I was promised to someone once. She ended it 6 moons before the wedding, said she wasn't ready. I thought I'd break. But time pulls you forward even when you don't want it to." We sat in silence for a while. That kind of silence only 2 wounded souls can share and understand. She finished her tea slowly, then glanced toward the door. "Would you like to walk a bit?" she asked. "I just need to leave this place for a while." The morning air outside was crisp but not cold. We walked down the muddy path that curved past the smithy and the old market square. Past that, the road narrowed between hedges and stone fences. We passed familiar houses, empty lanes. No one waved, no one called out. It felt like the world knew she needed space. I forgot what clean air felt like. She said after a while, her voice soft walking beside me. "I've been trapped inside my own head too long." I looked over at her. Something in the way she moved was different. Not healed, not yet, but lighter, like some weight had lifted off her shoulders. "You're stronger than you think," I told her. She gave me a small smile, uncertain but sincere. "That's kind of you to say." As we walked, the talk turned gentler, less heavy. She told me about a traveling juggler who'd once spilled wine on her dress during a summer fair. I told her about the time I'd fallen face first into a pig pen while trying to impress a girl. We laughed quiet at first, but then louder, freer. She didn't just smile, she laughed. And it had been too long since I'd seen that kind of joy on her face. It was real. I caught myself smiling just watching her. "It's good to hear you laugh again," I said. I didn't realize how much I'd missed it. "Me neither," she replied. "Feels like it's been seasons since I've felt anything close to normal." By the time we rounded the final bend that led back to her manor, something in her had changed. She still looked tired, still carried the weight. But it didn't bury her anymore. At the bottom of her stone steps, she turned to me. "Thank you, Lucan. I don't think anyone's ever stood beside me like you did." "You don't have to thank me," I said, plain and honest. "I'm just glad I was there." She looked at me, really looked, and her voice wavered slightly. "I've been surrounded by people for years, and still I've never felt this safe." I didn't know what to say, but I felt it too. That quiet pull. Not something spoken aloud, but something true. I gave her a small nod. "Anytime, Lady Sienna." I turned to leave, but her hand gently wrapped around my wrist. I stopped and looked back. "Would you mind staying for the midday meal?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's a lot to ask after everything last night. I don't want to be alone." That struck me. Not because it was dramatic, it wasn't. It was just honest. Of course, I said, offering a soft smile, I'd be glad to. We ended up side by side in her kitchen, pulling together what bread, cheese, and root vegetables she had left. I nearly butchered the turnips, trying to slice them evenly, and she laughed so hard she nearly dropped the pot. We talked and chopped like old friends, no awkwardness, just ease. That's when I learned she loved tending to herbs and flowers. She used to keep a garden by the rear wall of the manor full of mint and lavender. She collected little pressed drawings from passing peddlers. She couldn't stand onions, but somehow loved onion stew. Sunlight streamed through the small window above the basin, golden and soft, and I realized something. Quietly, I didn't want to leave. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I could see it in her eyes. She didn't want me to go either. It wasn't romantic, not yet. But there was something real here. Something gently stitched together from broken edges. When I finally stood to head home, hours later, she walked me to the door. "Thank you again, Lucan," she said softly. "You've no idea how much it meant. I'm nearby," I said. "Anytime." As I walked back across the lane, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. My life had always been quiet, predictable. And that had been enough. Until now. Meeting her like this in the storm had already started to change something in me. I paused just before closing my cottage door and looked back at her home across the lane. I didn't know why. I just knew I'd be back. The next few weeks slipped into a quiet rhythm neither of us had planned. After work, I'd often stop by, sometimes with a fresh loaf from the baker, sometimes just to say hello. Other times, I'd bring a small bundle of wildflowers I'd picked along the path, daisies, marigolds, anything bright. I didn't really think about it. It just felt right. I wasn't trying to win her over. I just wanted to see her smile. And slowly, She did. The first time I brought her flowers, she stared at them like she'd never been given a simple kindness before. No one's ever brought me flowers, just because, she said softly, eyes glistening. Well, I said with a smile, someone has now. We spent many afternoons out on her stone bench under the tree, sipping elderflower tea or cold cider, watching the village drift by. Sometimes we talked about silly things, her first horse, my worst work, mishaps, how I once built a stool with 3 legs on accident. Sometimes we went quiet. And other times, the talk grew heavy again, about trust, about heartbreak, regret. She didn't try to hide how wounded she still was. Her laugh was returning, but there was still something guarded in her eyes. One evening, as spring winds stirred the ivy along her walls, I noticed her staring at her wedding band. I keep thinking, she whispered, if I take it off, then it's truly over. I didn't say much. I simply reached out, let my fingers touch hers. You don't have to rush, I said. There's no clock on healing. She looked at me, really looked, and there was something soft in her gaze, something searching. You're good at that, she said. At what? Making it feel like I can breathe again. Hearing her say that hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't come into her life hoping for anything, but each day I found myself caring more, not just for her, but for how she held herself together. And it wasn't her beauty, though she had that. It was her honesty, her quiet strength. The way she could laugh one moment and fight tears the next. It made me want to protect that part of her, not own it, not fix it, just protect it. One night after a long walk by the river's edge, we stopped beneath the lantern by her door. There was a long silence, the kind that stretches too far to be just goodbye. Would you like to come in? She asked gently. My heart thumped in my chest. I saw it in her eyes, the conflict. Part of her wanted the comfort, the closeness. But part of her was still scared. Not tonight, I said, keeping my voice soft. I don't want you to think I expect anything. I'm here because I care. Not because I want something from you. Relief spread across her face, but underneath it, something deeper. Something scared. Something about you scares me, she said quietly. You truly are different. I gave her a calm smile. Then we go at your pace. No faster. In the days that followed, little things began to shift. One evening, without a word, she slid the old wedding band from her finger and tucked it into a carved box on the mantel. After that, she laughed more. Her smiles stuck around longer. She even teased me when I completely ruined a pot of barley cakes one morning. That same week, on a clear market day, she asked if I'd help her plant flowers by the garden wall. We knelt in the dirt, together, sleeves, rolled hands, muddy, laughing like fools as we tried to keep her golden retriever Bran from trampling every blossom we placed. He had grown fond of me, always following me like a shadow tail wagging with every step. I think Bran likes you better than me now, she said, brushing the soil from her skirt. I leaned back, grinning. Can you blame him? I bring the dried meat. Later we sat together on the grass, sipping cold cider and admiring the crooked rows of wildflowers and herbs we'd just planted. She stared out over it, then said, voice low, Thank you, Lucan. For what? For reminding me I'm still a person, not just someone left behind. I reached over, letting my fingers just graze hers. Sienna, you've always been whole. You've just been walking through fire. Our eyes met. There was something there, not romance, not quite, but a flicker of warmth, of recognition, of trust, trying to grow. I pulled my hand back slowly. I didn't want to push her, not yet. Later that week, I returned home from the smithy to find a small wooden box waiting on my doorstep. Inside was a carved cup painted with leaves and vines and 3 bold words etched across the rim, Best Neighbor Ever. Tucked beneath it was a note written in her hand. You've done more for me in these weeks than I can say. Thank you for reminding me that kind hearts still walk this world. I stood there for a long time, just holding it. It wasn't just about kindness anymore, not just friendship. Something deeper had started taking root, whether I'd meant for it or not. And yet, I knew she wasn't ready to open that door fully. Not yet. That next night we sat near the hearth in her drawing room. The fire crackled low and Bran snored softly on the floor between us. Sienna let out a yawn and leaned gently against my shoulder. "Is this all right?" she whispered. "Of course," I said at once. "Whatever feels right to you." Her voice trembled a little. "I don't know where this is going, Lucan, but I don't want you to go." I wrapped my arm gently around her, not to hold her, just to steady her. "I'm not going anywhere." In that quiet moment, something shifted. We weren't just two lonely people anymore. We were slowly becoming something more. Something real. Something fragile. I stayed a while longer that night, letting her lean against me while we talked softly about nothing. When I finally rose to leave, she walked me to the door and watched me cross the lane, her expression unreadable, but softer than before. I couldn't erase her pain. I knew that. But maybe I could show her with patience and presence what it felt like when someone truly stayed. As I walked beneath a sky full of stars, I caught myself smiling. For the first time in years, it felt like something good might actually be beginning. By the end of that week, I made a decision, one I'd gone back and forth on. I thought maybe it was too much, too soon. But in the end, I trusted what I felt. She needed a break, a breath, a place beyond this village where her heart didn't feel so heavy. That morning, I arrived at her door with 2 scrolls tied in ribbon travel writs from the mayor's office signed and sealed. Passage by cart and ship to the seaside town of Windale, known for warm air and quiet cliffs. She opened the door wearing that same tired smile, the one that somehow still lit the space around her. "Lucan," she said, head tilting. "What's with the grin?" I held up the scrolls. "I know this is sudden, but I've arranged travel. Just for a week. To Windale." No pressure. She stared at the papers in my hands like they were forged from gold. "You're serious. Dead serious. I know you're still mending. But sometimes a change of view helps you breathe again." She looked like she might say no, and I would have accepted that, but then something shifted behind her eyes. Slowly she smiled. "For real." "You're impossible, Lucan." I grinned. "I'll take that as a yes." She actually laughed. Loud, free, unguarded. It lit the whole hall. "Yes," she said, "I'd love that." The next morning we boarded the cart at sunrise, just the 2 of us, and Bran curled at her feet. The roads were long, winding through fields and hills, and by dusk we reached the ship that would carry us to the coast. We didn't speak much, but the silence felt easy. Natural. We didn't need to fill it. When we reached Windale, the warm sea breeze wrapped around us like a wool cloak fresh from the sun. Sienna closed her eyes and took a long breath. "This feels good." We checked into a quiet little inn on the edge of Windale, a stone-built place with ivy creeping up its sides nestled against the cliffs. From the windows you could see the sea on one side and the mountains on the other. The breeze smelled like salt and pine. Our first full day was spent wandering the narrow cobbled lanes. We stopped at a scroll seller's shop, lingered over a weaver's stall with bright linens, and ducked into an old bookseller's nook tucked behind a chapel wall. At a roadside bench, we sipped chilled berry cordial from clay cups and watched the townsfolk pass by. I caught myself watching her when she wasn't looking, how her eyes lit up at pressed flowers tucked into books, how she smiled at silly wood-carved postcards with bad puns etched in ink. That night we dined under lanterns strung between cedar beams at a small tavern built into the hillside. The food was hearty and rich, but I hardly noticed it. I couldn't stop watching her, not because of how she looked, but because of how she felt. Relaxed in a way I hadn't seen back home. Unburdened. Later, walking back through the winding streets under a sky scattered with stars, she paused mid-step. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet, sincere. "You were right. I really did need this." "You deserve it," I said. "All of it." That week passed like a dream neither of us had planned. We began our mornings walking the coastal trails, the sea wind tugging at our cloaks, our boots crunching gently along the dirt path. In the afternoons, we sat in shaded courtyards with drinks of mint and lemon, reading, talking, or simply listening to the gulls overhead. One afternoon, I noticed her standing by the inn's back wall, overlooking the ocean. Her expression was calm, not just quiet, but truly calm in a way I hadn't seen before. "I never thought I'd feel peaceful again," she said softly. "But you gave me that, Lucan." I reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. Each night we either tried some little cookhouse in the village or brought roasted meat and greens back to our room and ate on the balcony. Watching the sun sink behind the peaks became our ritual. No words, no ceremony, just presence. And something between us began to change. It wasn't loud, wasn't declared, but it grew steady, unspoken true. On the 6th day, we borrowed 2 worn-down horses and rode the garden paths near the monastery gardens. The place was overflowing with bloom herbs, wildflowers, climbing vines, and hanging petals of every shade. At one point, she stopped near a patch of yellow wildflowers, dismounted, and stood still, just staring. "My mother loved these," she said. "She used to tell me, find beauty even in the hard places." I stepped down and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "She'd be proud of you." Sienna gave me a tearful smile. "I think she would be." I finally found someone who actually sees me, Lucan. The real me. Not the one who plays the part, not the polished version, not the perfect wife, or the woman who holds everything together. Her words hit something deep in my chest. I wanted to tell her I loved her right there, right then, but I didn't. Not yet. She wasn't ready. And something this real didn't need rushing. Before we knew it, our last evening in Windale had arrived. We walked along the outer ridge of the inn where the land met the cliffs and the sea met the sky. The air was painted orange and gold. The waves below sparkled like hammered bronze. We didn't speak much until she stopped and turned toward me. "I've been dreading going home," she admitted. "But for the first time in years, I think I can do it. Because of you." I took her hands in mine, both of them gently. "You did this, Sienna. I just had the honor of walking beside you." Her voice dropped. "I'm still scared, Lucan. Scared to believe in anything again. Scared you won't stay." I brushed my thumb across her hand slowly. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time, she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't fiery or desperate. It was soft, intentional, quiet hope made real. When we parted, we didn't say a thing. We didn't need to. That night we packed in silence. Not a sad silence, just stillness. The kind that comes when something ends, but something else is just beginning. At the docks, waiting for the ferry that would take us back upriver, she leaned her head on my shoulder. "Lucan," she whispered. Thank you for giving me back a part of myself I thought I'd lost." I kissed the top of her head. "It's just the beginning." As the ship pulled away from the dock, I looked out across the open water with a quiet smile. I knew what came next, and I was ready. So was she. When we arrived back in Eld Hollow, something about her had changed. The weight she used to carry, it was lighter now. Her step was measured, but no longer wary. Her hands didn't tremble when she opened her gate. Her eyes held something they hadn't in a long time, peace. The ride home was quiet, but not awkward. The silence felt warm, steady. When we reached her cottage, Bran ran out like we'd been gone a year. He bolted down the lane, leapt into her arms, nearly knocked her over. She laughed, fell to her knees, and hugged him tight, and in that moment I saw her laughter for what it truly was. Not polite, not guarded, not half-hearted, pure, unburdened, free. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new kind of rhythm. We still went on our evening walks, still shared simple meals, still sat by the hearth or out on the garden bench wrapped in quiet and the scent of mint from her herb patch. But something was different now. There was a closeness, a calmness, a knowing. We didn't have to speak of it, it just was. Neither of us wanted to lose whatever it was we were slowly building. One evening, as we followed our usual path along the lake, she quietly slipped her hand into mine. No hesitation. That simple gesture said more than any vow could have. We stopped at our favorite bench overlooking the still water where the sun was casting streaks of pink and orange across the sky. A breeze moved through the grass, soft as a breath. Sienna let out a long, slow sigh, the kind that tells you someone is finally learning how to breathe again. "I didn't think I'd feel whole again," she said quietly. "You were never broken," I replied, "just hurting." She squeezed my hand gently. "You don't know what you've done for me, Lucan. I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't have to." I had known for a while what I wanted to do. I'd played it out in my mind 100 different ways, but right then I knew it was time. I stood slowly and turned toward her. She looked up at me, puzzled, her expression soft and open. I reached into my tunic and pulled out the small linen pouch I'd carried with me since we returned from Windale. Inside was a simple silver ring I had forged myself and the smithy polished smooth with a tiny carving of intertwined vines on the band. Her eyes widened the moment she saw it. "Sienna," I began, my voice low but steady despite the thunder in my chest. "Neither of us saw this coming. We weren't looking for it. But what we've found, it's real." I paused, searching her gaze. "You've made me believe in love again. You've shown me what it means to care without keeping count, to stay even when things are hard and messy and uncertain. I can't picture a world without you in it." I opened the pouch, revealing the ring. "Will you marry me?" Sienna stared down at it, then at me. Her hands trembled as they came up to her face, her eyes brimming. I don't even know what to say," she whispered. "Then say what you feel," I said gently. She shook her head, tears falling freely now, laughter threading through her sobs. "You completely caught me off guard." I smiled, my heart hammering. "I have a habit of that." She stepped forward, wiping her cheeks. 15 years, Lucan. I spent 15 years feeling invisible, giving everything to someone who barely looked at me. I truly believed I'd never be enough for anyone again. And then one day, you walked across the lane and gave me my life back. She reached up, cupping my face in both hands, her touch warm and steady. "Yes," she whispered, voice breaking. "Yes, Lucan. I'll marry you." I slipped the ring onto her finger, and her smile lit up the dusk like a lantern. We held each other tightly, neither of us ready to let go. Her head rested against my chest, and for the first time in a long, long time, she felt safe. And so did I. 6 moons later, we stood by the lake, where I'd proposed, exchanging vows beneath the same sky. The bench where I'd asked her to be mine had become a quiet monument to a new beginning. Bran, our loyal hound, trotted down the path with a ribbon tied to his collar tail, wagging like mad. Friends and family gathered. Not nobles or lords, just those who mattered. People who had watched the journey from start to now. I vow to love you on the good days. And the hard ones, I told her, my voice steady. To be patient while you keep healing. To never stop showing up. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she smiled through them. "And I vow to let myself be loved," she said. "To believe this is real. And to never forget that you saved me when I couldn't save myself." When the elder finally declared us husband and wife, I kissed her slowly, fully, right there beneath the soft, eld hollow sky, with Bran barking happily and laughter rising from every direction. Our life wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. There were rough days. Nights when old fears crept back in, moments when the past still reached out with cold fingers. But we never faced them alone again. Not once. We held hands through every storm. We traveled sometimes only to the next town, sometimes downriver by barge, once as far as the northern hills. We adopted another stray pup. We turned her once silent house, now our home, into a place filled with warmth and laughter and second chances. Most evenings, we'd sit on the porch, Bran curled up at our feet, the lake glowing beneath the setting sun. She would rest her head on my shoulder and whisper, "I never thought I'd have this." And I would always answer the same way. "You deserve every bit of it." What we had didn't come from fairy tales. It came from patience, from kindness, from the choice to trust again even when it hurt, from choosing each other day after day when it would have been easier to walk away. That was our story, and it unfolded exactly as it was meant to.